Hi everyone, Jessica here from Paper Ink Stamp and welcome back to another card making video. So today we're going to be looking at the newest issue of Simply Cards and Papercraft. This is issue 210 and we've got this really beautiful big Altenew stamp set with a few coordinating dies. So the bell, we have 3 separate stamps for that, and that will layer together beautifully to create an image, along with a few extra little stamps to add a little bit more detail to it. We've got this really lovely big sort of branches or leaves here as well, and of course there's really fabulous sentiments and they are massive as well, and I really love that about this set. So as always, let's take a quick look through the magazine at the inspiration that they have given us. And I just think that the samples within the magazine are absolutely beautiful. As soon as I seen that this was going to be the next free gift, I was super excited to get started using it. So for the card we're going to create today, I am going to use a couple of the Altenew mini ink cubes, which you can see they've used in the magazine. We're also going to use a couple of other ink pads as well, but they do have an offer, and I believe it's 10% off Craft Stash from the mini cubes. You can see one here, so make sure you check the Craft Stash website for that deal. But again, they've got loads of sort of how-tos in here, how to stamp the leaves, how to create that layered bell image as well, which of course we're going to be doing. And again, just another little section of inspiration. Really loads of different kinds of cards in here. You've got that really beautiful bow in a stamp and in a die as well. You can create wreaths, you can create backgrounds. Again, those sentiments I think are really brilliant. They're not very traditional, so you've got like December to remember. I think that's really lovely. You've got that nice mixture of font, and you've got that really sort of lovely kind of big thick font, and then underneath it something a little bit thinner, and I just think it works really well. You can see this card at the bottom, they've done I'm guessing that's some embossing with maybe some gold embossing powder, and I think that's worked really lovely. So in the next issue of Simply Cards and Papercraft, we've got this bumper festive kit. So this is a cut and emboss folder with stamps, and it looks like there's some additional papers that you can download with some templates for making dimensional cards. So next month, definitely be having a look at that. But for now, let's get into today's card. So the first thing I'm going to show you about is the bell stamps themselves, and we're going to have a go at layering them out. So you can see that I've got my Altenew cubes at the top. So we're going to be using that sort of pinky range of colours. So we've got Pink Pearl, Coral Bliss, Vineyard Berry and Heartbeat. I don't end up using the 2 darker ones. I mainly stick with the 2 lighter colours. But this is the first stamp, so you always want to start with your lightest colour. Now, I don't know if you ever experience this at home. You get a stamp set through and you get this kind of beading on the surface. It doesn't cover very well. I don't know if this is more to do with the stamps or the ink pad, because I do find that this happens with my Altenew ink cubes. I don't tend to use them very often, but you can really see that it's beading, unless you want that kind of effect, which maybe it could look quite nice. I personally don't want that. I want to have a really great image. So one of the ways that I found to kind of combat this is by taking just a regular nail file and almost buffering the surface of the stamp, and it kind of takes that top coat off and it makes the image, the stamp, just a little bit cloudy, but I find that you get a much better impression, and you can see that here. So this bottom one is after I filed down our stamp, and you just get a much more solid image. And I had to then do this with my other layering stamp. So all 3 of these stamps I did the same thing, and it just gave a better impression. So you can see this top one again, if you want that kind of look, I think depending on what you're stamping, that could look quite cool. But for this, again, we want that nice solid image, because the idea of this is layering them up to get that sort of difference of colour, adding shadow in there. So you don't kind of want that sort of speckled texture. But even with this, which is just a small stamp, got a little bit of detail, I've had to file that down as well. There might be lots of different ways that you can achieve, getting that proper solid image that you're looking for. I find personally by just using that nail file, that kind of works best for me. Again, I did the same thing again with this outline. I am stamping it here in black, and I do kind of stamp it off center just a little bit, but you get an idea of what this image is going to look like and how it's going to start building up. So you can see on the left hand side that I did sort of do a couple more tests with the colours, with the stamps themselves, trying to get the best impression as possible. And you can see here that I've just taken that VersaFine black onyx colour and I've just stamped all of those black outlines. So I personally found it easier to stamp the outlines first. I felt like I was able to line my images up a lot better, but again, you do this in whichever way you feel most comfortable with. So I am using just a different combination of the colours. Again, your base stamp, so your solid base has to be your lightest colour. Then as you layer up those images, you need to then take a step into a darker shade. So your base is always your lightest, and then say your last layer is always going to be your darkest. So again, on the left hand side, those sort of top two, you can see that I've stamped the outline in a darker colour. I think that was the Heartbeat red colour. Again, that still gives the same effect, looks really nice, but I did decide to go with the black. I've also, as well, with this one that I'm stamping now, I decided to try a sort of two-tone. So I took, I think it was a Pink Pearl and Coral Bliss. I used that for my base, so I just stamped, you know, a little bit on each side, met them in the middle, and then I took the Vineyard Berry to give it that shadow, which is the second stamped image, and you can experiment, you know, doing that as well. You could mix different colours together, not just from the same colour family, and just sort of experiment a little bit more. So I'm going to be using, I only end up using 3 on our card today, but I just wanted to sort of stamp them in slightly different ways and sort of just then pick the ones that I wanted to use. So I then moved on to using those blue ink pads that you can see. So the ones that I used was the Iceberg, Eastern Sky, and I think I used the Ultramarine as well. But I'm just following that same process. So I'm using the lightest, which is this Iceberg. This is going to be my base colour. What I did find once I stamped this first one, that I had to go in and file it again. But again, I don't know if that is more to do with the ink pads or the stamps. I just know that that filing, that just very top surface, does help get a better impression. And of course, you can restamp those images as well. It does then make the colour a little bit darker, so make sure you keep that in mind when you go to pick your next colour. But it's just sort of, again, whatever way you can find to get that sort of perfect image that you are kind of looking for. So I really love how these are stamped out in the blues. I think I'm definitely going to try this using just my regular Prism watercolour ink pads, because I have used Altenew's layering stamps in the past with those ink pads, and I found that they actually gave a really fantastic coverage without having to do any like prep work to the stamps like this. So it might be interesting maybe in another video that we'll have a look at using a couple of other ink pads. But for now, that's all of our bells stamped, and you can see just as a whole really how beautiful these layering stamps are. And all I'm going to do then is take our coordinating dies and cut these images out. So now we can get started creating our background for our card. So this is an A2 size card, and we're doing a top fold in. We're going to create the background just using the sort of leaves and the foliage stamp. So there are, I believe there was 3 foliage stamps in here, all sort of a variety of colours, a variety of sizes, and sort of in just a little bit of a different direction. So I've prepped the stamps again. So I did try to use the green range of colours. So I've got the Minty Mint, I've got Sweet Leaf, Just Green, and Hunter Green. So I tried those first, and I had the same kind of problem where it's beading on the surface. So I did decide to try the Prism watercolour. So I took the Apple Green and the Rainforest, and I just felt like this worked so much better. So I decided to go straight for these to create our background. So you can see I'm just stamping the last few images onto this background. I'm trying to get a sort of solid covering at the top, and then just kind of having them cascading down the page. I think this makes a really beautiful background. This is going to be a really lovely backdrop to our bells and our sentiment, because they're quite striking. We want those to be the main kind of elements of our card. So now we've got our background all sorted, we can move on to the next stage. So like I said previously, I was going to use the coordinating dies to cut out the bells. The bows, I've just used the die. I haven't used the stamp and the die. And I've cut this out of some gold glitter card, which I'm actually going to be using to mat and layer our card. So you can see how it's going to kind of come together with those bows. It's just going to finish this off really beautifully. I wanted to add just a little bit of shimmer onto our bells. So I've just taken the Spectrum Noir shimmer pen. So this is clear, but it's got a glitter in it. It does make the images look a little bit darker, so it makes that ink look a little bit wet again, but it does dry back. It just gives it a really, like I said, really beautiful finish, and just adds a little bit of sparkle, because of course this is a Christmas card. It needs to have a bit of Christmas sparkle. So once we've got our bells all finished, then we can start sort of assembling our card, but first we're going to look at adding our sentiments. So I'm going to take one of the big sentiments from our stamp set, and this is Joyful Traditions. Again, quite untraditional sentiments in this stamp set, and I really love that. It's nice to have a variety, when you're making your Christmas cards, especially if you're making a lot of them. You don't want them all to be exactly the same. So as I said, I'm making an A2 card. So off the top of my head, so A2 is a 5.5 by 4.25 inch. I cut my mat and layer down, so I believe this is a 5 by 3.75 inch panel. And you can see that that sentiment just fits on here. And because I make a lot of bigger cards, obviously my sentiments aren't ever big enough to kind of be that bold statement on the card. I really loved actually creating a smaller card and have that sentiment fit on it, and be that real big bold sentiment. So definitely going to try sort of making some smaller cards. So you can see here, so I've finished stamping my sentiments. I haven't heat embossed this or anything. I was thinking about doing it, but I don't really want to make this video any longer than what it already is. I decided to only use 3 of the bells, not the 4th one, just because it was starting to look a little bit crowded. So what I'm going to do, just to make this a little bit more realistic, I'm going to take my T-square ruler, and I sort of roughly know the position of where I want to put my bells, but I'm just going to draw in with a black fine liner, just that little bit of sort of string or ribbon. There's lots of different mediums, or you could use ribbon. There's loads of different ways of being able to create this look, but I just wanted to go with that sort of thin black marker. So just done that, 3 different heights, so you can see then where our bells are going to sit. Nice variety of heights, and it's going to fit in nicely around our sentiment as well. So to attach these onto the card, I wanted to just add a little bit of dimension. I'm not going to use any foam pads for the actual sort of card itself. So I'm going to put this onto just some mini foam squares. So 3 squares per bell I thought worked absolutely perfectly. And then, like I said, it's just going to add a little bit of dimension to our card. So now we've got our bells down, I'm just going to add on our bows. So if you were using the stamp for this, if you were happy to fussy cut, what you could do is stamp your bow. You could create a mask for that and then stamp your bell image. That would give the impression that the bell is in that same position where you can see I've put that first bow down. And then you could fussy cut the whole thing out, but I've just taken some regular glue and just put in a little bit of dab of glue sort of in the centre of that bow, and I'm just sticking it onto our bell, and I just think that finishes it really, really beautifully. So I'm just going to attach this onto my mat and layer, and I'm just going to leave this to one side for a second just to dry off because I don't want anything to move. And you can see I've taken that same gold glitter card as we've used for the bows, and it's just going to tie that back in really beautifully. And now what we're going to do, while we've got everything out, we are just going to decorate the inside of our card. So I wanted to stamp one of the sentiments into the inside of my card. I didn't want it to be one of these big ones, but they have got this really beautiful with that thin, sort of tall and thin font, and this is Holiday Fun. So I'm stamping this in the centre. I'm using that Versamark ink as well, because I felt like that gave it the best impression. I didn't want to press too hard with this and sort of distort the lettering a little bit, but I did have to stamp this a couple of times just to get, that better sort of image. So now we've got our sentiment on the inside, we're going to go ahead and put this extra bell image. So I've mentioned this previously, if you've got any imagery that you've created to go on the front of your card and perhaps you've got it spare, you don't need it, put it on the inside and it's just going to finish off your card really nicely. So you can see all I've done is done that same thin black line coming from the top of our card. That's going to grind our bell to the card itself, and then I'm using that extra bow that we cut, and that's going to finish that off really lovely. So I wasn't planning to make an envelope to go with this card today because I felt like this video was long enough. As you might tell, I have sort of sped this up so the video isn't too long, but I really couldn't resist because I did really love this stamp set. So we're going to make our own envelope to match. So I've taken out my We Are Memory Keepers 123 punch board, and we're going to make an A2 envelope to go with our card. So I've cut just some plain white cardstock down. So the actual card size that you needed was 8 1/4 inch, and then I've started the score at 3 5/8, and then just followed it around as per the instructions, I have got another video. I can link to that if you're not 100% sure what to do. But it's super, super easy to create your own envelopes. So the paper I've used here, this is the Ink Me cardstock. This is just because I had a big piece. You don't need to use an A3 piece of paper to create this size envelope, but I just decided to because I want to stamp on this. So I did use, this is the 300 GSM cardstock, and I still think it folded absolutely perfectly. So because I only want to decorate the front panel of our envelope, I am just going to mask off the top and the corner, and the left-hand side, because I don't want to get any of my stamped images or any ink or anything onto those flaps, because I just want to have a really clean sort of front panel. So I'm just doing 2 sort of rows. If you've got thicker, obviously, it depends how much you think you're going to go over, but again, it's just to protect it. So I'm going to take these foliage stamps again, and I'm going to use those same colours from the Prism Watercolour ink range. So we've got the apple and the rainforest green, and again, I'm just following that same design. So I'm, varying the heights of them, obviously using the 2 different colours together. I'm sort of rotating them a little bit. The couple of things that you do need to just be careful of, obviously, when you are decorating envelopes, if you're putting them through the post, is the stamp. You don't want to kind of go too far over to the right. I'm guessing it needs to be pretty blank, I think, for them, the post office, to do what they need to do. And of course, then you still need to put your address on here as well. But when you put the finished envelope and our card together, I just think it looks so beautiful together. But like I said, so just creating that cascading, kind of foliage, exactly like we had on the card itself. And I'm actually going to do 2 bells on here as well. And I know I mentioned earlier about trying the World of Colour ink pads with this, and that's actually what I'm going to do now. And I just found that I had such a great result with it. So for the bells, the 2 colours that I used was Apricot Sorbet as my lightest colour, and then Flamingo Paradise for that extra detail stamp. And you can see I'm just sampling it here just to make sure that the 2 colours kind of work nicely together. The other way that you can do this, I know I've done this with previous Altenew layering stamps, is actually just using the same colour. So if you use a particular light colour, and if you just stamp it multiple times, the colour did kind of build up a little bit. So I think that just worked really well. And the reason why I went for sort of lighter colours here was, again, because this is an envelope, you still need to be able to see the, address and everything like that. It dried back a little bit lighter, and it was almost a little bit muted across the whole background. And again, I just think it just worked really well. I thought it was really beautiful. You can see that I've overlapped. You can still see that little bit of foliage behind it, and I really love that as well. I think that doesn't bother me, that you're able to see that sort of through it. But yeah, I just think this worked really, really well. And the last thing I'm going to do, again, to match in what we've done on the outside and the inside of our card, going to create those thin black sort of string lines. And the only difference I'm going to do is just draw in just a little bow using this same pen. And I just think that finishes it. Again, those little tiny finishing touches, I think is absolutely perfect. So that is our envelope, just pulling off the tape, which is always really nice to see that nothing's ever bled through, and you've just got that really beautiful sort of front panel. So to assemble our envelope together, I'm just going to use some red liner tape. Again, lots of different types of glues and things I know I've seen out there on the market that you could use, but I'm just simply using red liner tape because it's super strong. So I do put my tape on the inside of the flaps, but I did decide just to put a little bit, not too far up, on our bottom flap as well, just so you didn't have sort of too much of a gap. But I do tend to really only put it just on the side pieces. So just take the sort of top release section off, just fold the middle sections in, and then pull up the bottom, and I just think it just makes the most beautiful envelope. So here is our finished card and envelope. So I did just go ahead and attach our front panel onto, like I said, an A2 top folding card that I just made myself. I actually cut this down from, I believe it was like an 8x8 inch card. I just cut this down from that. But you can see the dimension that we've got from those bells. You can see that really beautiful envelope just matches so perfectly. And of course then the true test is whether the card actually fits in the envelope or not. I can just imagine this dropping through someone's letterbox, and I just think they would be so blown away by that envelope decorating and the fact that it just matches so perfectly. So to get that to match a little bit more, of course, you could have used the same colours for those bells, but I quite like the variety actually and the difference between it, because I think the envelope is just a little bit more subtle. So I honestly think this is one of my favourite Christmas stamps we've had yet. I love the Altenew layering stamps anyway. I love these big bold sentiments. I just think it's a really fabulous set, and I would really recommend grabbing this magazine before it sells out. So that's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's given you some inspiration and a first look at this magazine and the free Altenew gift that you get. If you do like this card and envelope, please give this video a thumbs up, because it does really help to support my channel and it's helping me to grow massively, and I really appreciate that. Leave me a comment down below, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do so you don't miss out on any future videos. We will of course be doing more videos using this Altenew stamp set, see what else we can create. So that's it for today. Thanks very much for watching, and happy crafting.